Brandon, as a prolific three-point shooter in pickup basketball, how hard is it to make a wide open three?
Well, first of all, I love this. I love this question. Thank you. First of all, I mean, it's probably a lot easier in pickup basketball, at your local gym or in church league than it is in front of, 20,000 people and on national TV in the Western Conference Finals. But in pickup basketball, a wide open three, I would say is about, a coin flip, 50-50 chance for a good shooter.
Well, if you were to get in front of, say, anybody on the Thunder who is shooting poorly, which is most of the team, what guidance would you give them?
Put your hand in the cookie jar. That's the advice I got.
The first day of basketball camp.
Go back to the basics. That's the advice I was given when I was like 8 years old and first picked up a basketball, and it's worked for me for all these years. So yeah, that's the advice I give. So if you're listening, put your hand in the cookie jar, Thunder.
Welcome back to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, publisher of Daily Thunder, and I'll be your host today. Alongside me is Daily Thunder beat writer Brandon Rahbar. Brandon, how are you feeling today?
You know what? Obviously, after the Thunder losing by over 40 points in a game three, had the Thunder won, the series basically would have been over. But look, we knew the Wolves were going to be desperate. We knew the Wolves were going to have a rowdy home crowd, and they were going to play their best game of the series in a game three. We knew they were going to throw their biggest punch. So I don't think it was unexpected. After the Thunder went up 2-0, I was like, look, I'm shifting my prediction to Thunder in 5, and I think the Wolves will get one in Minnesota, but they'll split, and I think they'll get game 3. I think Minnesota will get game 3. The issue was I didn't see, and I don't think anybody saw, the Wolves getting game 3 in the manner in which they got game 3.
Well, let's go backwards. We'll start when things were much better. Game 1. Leading into game 1, the Thunder looked like they had maybe matured quite a bit over in the playoffs. They won 2 games back-to-back in comeback fashion against the Nuggets, including one on the road in a must-win game 4. Turn around and won game 5 at home. Although they did lose game 6, they blew the Nuggets out in game 7. And then leading into game 1, the Thunder just absolutely demolished the Wolves, who were coming off over a week's rest. It looked like after that game, the Thunder had maybe figured things out. They had grown up, they had gotten battle-tested, and they were focused. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming off of that game 7 against the Nuggets, the season on the line against this championship team and Jokic, the 3-time MVP, to win that game 7 and to win in the manner in which they won it was incredibly impressive. And to follow that up with, one day of rest after the Wolves got all this rest and to win game 1 in the manner in which they won it was incredibly impressive, not just for a young team, but for any team to be able to do that. Wholly impressive. And yes, I do think, and I still think, regardless of what we know now after game 3, that this team did grow up a lot in that Denver series.
Yeah, and they did struggle. The Thunder did struggle in that first half. It did look a little bit maybe tired. I don't know what it was, a little out of focus, trying to get pumped up and ready for game 1. After the first quarter, they trailed the Wolves 23-20. At the half, they trailed by 4. What do you think went wrong in that first half where they kind of got off to that sluggish start?
Honestly, I think that they came out a little tight, a little timid. I thought that, this is Western Conference Finals, and despite them growing and despite them, I think, showing a lot of maturity and resilience and all those things in that Denver series, all that was still true. this is still a very big stage, bigger than any stage that they'd ever been on. And I think besides Shai, I think Shai was ready for the moment from the jump. The other guys looked, just a little tight, little timid, little nervous, and that could be being too juiced up. The crowd was really into it to begin and all those things. So I think that was a part of it. I think that the energy shifted when Alex Caruso came in. I thought that, he was ready to go, and he brought like some force and some confidence to the team as soon as he came in. And I think that that's all it was. And once he came in, like to end the first quarter and to begin the second quarter, everything changed. And then J-Dub's second quarter was just so good, and everything snowballed from there.
Yeah. That first half was a little bit rough for both teams shooting. In particular, the Thunder shot just 37.5% from the field, 37.5% from three, which was, I guess, okay for them. They scored just 44 points. They had 8 turnovers in the first half. But they flipped a switch in the second half. In the second half, the Thunder shot 62%, including 8 of 13 from three for 61%. They were harassing the Wolves on defense. They forced 8 turnovers, and they had 5 steals. They scored 70 points. The Wolves just could not put the ball in the basket, especially in that third quarter, but then the Thunder kept the pressure on in the fourth quarter too. So it was kind of a tale of two halves, but it looked like the Thunder found something and then ran away with that game in the second half.
Yeah, that second half was just completely different. I mean, that was so impressive to come out down at halftime and to just dominate in the manner. And look, here's what changed. That defense leading to offense in the second half. The Thunder have had some issues with their half-court offense, especially in the playoffs. They've had issues three-point shooting. They've had issues, up and down as far as which players are going to be on or off any given night. But one thing that has been reliable, one thing that has been consistent has been that defense. And when that defense leads to offense, which is what we saw in that second half and especially in that third quarter, that's when this Thunder team can dominate. That's when they can kind of come in an avalanche of waves. All this defense, all these steals, all these turnovers leading to fast break points, and they are so good in transition. Nobody turns the ball over better on defense than the Thunder does, and nobody scores in transition better than the Thunder does. And that's what happened, I think, in the second half of game one. That's where I thought the entire game flipped.
And they really did frustrate Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle. The Thunder's offense was so good. They were exploiting Rudy Gobert on the defensive side of the ball. And he's a 0 on the offensive side of the ball. So they chased him off the court. I mean, kind of everything that went right. And I think one thing that was interesting about the defensive strategy for the Thunder is they were collapsing on the inside, much like they did to the Nuggets. And they were forcing the Wolves to kick out to the shooters. But one difference in the first half versus the second half is just how hard the team was closing out. And I think, I can't remember which Wolves player or somebody had noted is that the Thunder close out maybe harder than anybody else. And even if you think you've got an open three, they seal that gap so quickly that it causes the opponent to hoist up a three maybe a little faster than they thought. They didn't have the time that they thought, get a little more nervous. And it led to an incredibly poor shooting night for three from the Timberwolves, where they put 51 threes up and they made just 15 of them.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even when, so the Thunder have these elite perimeter defenders. Dort is constantly hounding you. Caruso is constantly hounding you. Cason Wallace is constantly hounding you. And then, of course, you got Shai with all his steals, Dub, his versatility, and then the rim protection. So usually when we talk about the Thunder perimeter defense and how smothering it is, it's hard for these guys to get off shots and those things. But the Wolves actually had a lot of open threes that they missed. But I agree with your point. I think that kind of the missing context is teams are so used to this Thunder team, closing out and being there. And if you've ever played pickup basketball, if you've got a guy that, is like a hounding defender, even when you're open, you shoot a little bit quicker. You shoot with a little bit less confidence. You feel like he's going to be there. Even if he's not there, you feel like he's going to close out faster. And you kind of have a quicker trigger when you are open because you don't want them to close out. So I saw the stat going around like, hey, the Wolves just missed a lot of wide open shots. Yeah, but the wide open shots against the Thunder are different than wide open shots against other teams because the Thunder's defense is in your head. There's arms everywhere. So even when they're not in your face, psychologically, it's like they're in your face because you're just expecting them to be there.
Yeah. So overall, it was exactly the kind of game that you wanted for the Thunder, especially in that second half. They did all the things that they wanted to do. They shot the ball well. They forced the Wolves into some tough positions. The Wolves did not shoot the ball well. They turned them over. The Wolves had 19 total turnovers that led to 31 points for the Thunder. The Wolves had 0 fast break points. The Thunder had 12. They kept the Wolves off of the glass. And then they ended up running away with this one with a 26-point victory. So feeling pretty good about game one, but going into game two, right? A 1-1 series is very different than a 2-0 series. And you would hope that the Thunder would lock in game two. And the first half kind of started out similar to game one. Both teams maybe a little sluggish, a lot of missed baskets, but the Thunder really closed that second quarter really, really well. It took an 8-point lead into halftime, ended up again running away with the Wolves in that third quarter en route to a 15-point win. What are your overall takeaways from game two?
Yeah, so game two, you had the spectacle and the ceremony of Shai winning MVP, getting the trophy from Adam Silver before the game. You had Chris Paul in the house. You had Stephen A. Smith, Kendrick Perkins. Like, it was kind of fun, the atmosphere that night. And what I thought was so great was that Shai gets the MVP trophy that night, and you can get caught up in that. You can get caught up in the emotion of that, but he was able to put those, emotions aside, and he just dominated. That was my main takeaway. On the night that he got the MVP trophy, he showed why he's the MVP. His 38 points, he was dominant, he was efficient, and I think that he changed the game at the end of the second half. It was 53-50. The Thunder were only up by 3. But he hits like a step back, sidestep 3 with like 16 seconds left to go in the half. So they go up 6. And then DiVincenzo had like this horrible possession for the Wolves. Thunder get it back. They foul Shai with like no time left. And he hits both free throws. So he scores 5 points at the end of the first half. And all of a sudden, from 53-50, it goes to 58-50. And I think the confidence for the Thunder, for the crowd, changed. It flipped. 58-50 feels a lot better than 53-50, and I think it changed for the Wolves a little bit too, because they were fighting and clawing that game to keep it within one possession and to go down like that. And then, of course, the second half happened again. Shai was just dominant, but I thought the overall biggest takeaway was not only was Shai dominant, it was the big three. This was the best kind of showpiece for the new Thunder big three in the playoffs, because all of them scored 22 or more points. Chet was incredible, J-Dub was outstanding, and Shai was the MVP. So I thought it was a great night for the big three.
Yeah, the big three ended up scoring 86 total points in that game. So they were really the catalyst for the Thunder pulling away in this one. But a lot of the same ingredients that worked in game one worked in game two. The Wolves continued to struggle from three-point range, shooting just 28%. Although the Thunder didn't score very well from three, they were attacking the paint. They were getting easy buckets. And they were also doing what they always do, forcing turnovers, forcing steals. They forced 14 turnovers for the Wolves, which led to 22 points for the Thunder. They led again in fast break points, 16-9. They again limited second chance opportunities for the Wolves. They kind of did all the right things, even on an off shooting night, for three for the Thunder. But I think one thing that really stood out to me, and I think maybe this is some of the lessons learned from the Nuggets series. The Thunder had a big lead. They were up by 24, and then the Wolves went on a pretty solid run. They cut that lead to 10. And then the big three of Shai, J-Dub, and Chet shut the door, especially in the final minutes of that fourth quarter, and left no doubt about the outcome of this game.
Yeah, that's what was so great, because obviously it was the big three, but not only was it the big three, like overall picture, yeah, they all had a great game, but they all were great down the stretch. Like if there was any doubt that was creeping in, and there was some nervous energy in the fourth quarter, because you got to remember the night before, the Pacers had that insane comeback against the Knicks where, they were completely out of the game. And then in the last few minutes, they just went crazy. And so maybe that was like fresh on some Thunder fans' minds. I felt like there was, just like this feeling of the arena, like, oh man, they need to close this out, because Thunder had dominated. They were up 24. The game felt like it was over. And then the Wolves made this push but it was Shai, it was Chet, it was Dub, over and over, big play after big play, big bucket after big bucket to close that game and to to go away back to Minnesota 2-0 or to go to Minnesota 1-1 is a huge difference. And it was Shai, Dub, and Chet in the final stretch of that game who made it happen. I thought that was big, not only for the night, not only for the series, but just like the future of the Thunder, seeing these three guys that you're building around play their best when the game was on the line and in a big game in a big series.
And again, in game two, the Thunder kind of took out the Wolves' best players. In game one, Ant struggled. They shut Randall out in the second half. They kept Gobert off the court in game one. In game two, Randall had a terrible game. He had just 6 points on 2 of 11 shooting, missed all the threes that he took. And Anthony Edwards was 12 of 26. He vowed to shoot more, and he did, but he made just 1 of 9 from 3. He did score 32 points, but he really had to work for every bit of those points, and he was a minus 22 for the game. And really, if not for some of the secondary players for the Wolves, like McDaniels, Naz Reid, and Gilgeous-Alexander Walker, who put up solid games, this one could have been even worse. So really, in the first 2 games, the Thunder dominated across the board, defensively, shutting out the Wolves' best players, forcing turnovers, and getting easy baskets. They shot the ball pretty well, especially on the inside. They figured out how to attack. They were exploiting Gobert. Everything was kind of going right in games 1 and 2. And you started to hear the S word getting thrown out in national media and in social media. Did you buy that hype? Now, you know different here, so be honest.
I did not buy the sweep. I changed it, and I think I'm on record, at least on the radio and another podcast, that I originally picked Thunder in 6, and then after the first 2 games, I switched it to Thunder in 5 because I thought that they would split in Minnesota, and I thought Minnesota would win game 3. So no, I did not believe in the sweep. Look, the Wolves are too good to be swept. I mean, this is still a very, very good team. They have the top end talent with Anthony Edwards. You have the secondary scorer in Julius Randle. You have the all defensive, guy and Rudy Gobert. Then you have some great role players in Jaden McDaniels and DiVincenzo and Gilgeous-Alexander Walker and Mike Conley. So no, I did not think that this was going to be a sweep. The Thunder played much, much better at home during these playoffs than they have on the road. They've shot much better at home than they have on the road. So no, I did not buy into the hype of the sweep, but I did shift it to Thunder in 5 instead of Thunder in 6.
Well, game 3 was a big one, right? Although maybe you had predicted the Thunder, if they were going to drop one, they would drop game 3. You knew that the Wolves would come out hungry, but there was an opportunity for the Thunder. If they win game 3, the series is over, right? They take full control over it, and the chance that the Wolves are going to be able to win, 4 out of 5. I mean, well, sorry, win 4 and keep the Thunder from winning 1 more. Pretty much zero chance of that happening.
Be careful there, John.
Well, we've seen the Thunder drop a 3-1 series lead, so, we may get to that point. Hopefully we get to that point where they've got a 3-1 lead. But, 3-0 series, pretty meaningful if the Thunder can kind of slam the door on the Wolves here. So I personally expected the Thunder to come out pretty focused, knowing how important this one is and how much they could take every bit of the wind out of any wind that might be in the Wolves' sails if playing at home, playing in front of their home crowd, if they could come out strong in this one. But the opposite happened. The Thunder scored the first 2 baskets of the game, and I can't remember the Thunder scoring ever again. Like, it was just awful. So kind of take me through your feelings as the game got more and more out of hand.
Yeah, so I was the same way. The Thunder came out, they had that big-to-big lob slam from Chet to Hart to open the game. Then they got up 4-0. You're like, wow, because you knew the Wolves were going to play desperate. You know they were going to throw their best punch. You knew the crowd was going to be really into it. But if there's one thing the Thunder could do to help, kind of put the advantage in game 3 to gain the advantage would be to come out with a great start. And it looked like it was going to happen. They get up 4-0. They look like the Thunder. And then it just all goes south from there. I think it really started. Lou Dort hit a 3 which, he's had his road 3-point shooting struggles in the playoffs. He hit a 3, but he stepped out of bounds, and so it didn't count. That would have put the Thunder up, I believe, 7-2. Instead, he's out of bounds, and then they don't score again forever, it felt like. Like you said, they were stuck in single digits at like 9 points for the longest time, and it was just snowballed. Anthony Edwards had like a steal on Jada that led to a fast break dunk, got the crowd really, really into it. Then there was another steal, fast break dunk for Anthony Edwards. Like the crowd was going ballistic. And then, you get confidence. You're playing desperate. You're playing hard anyways. And then that crowd gets into it. And then they started hitting every single 3. Like they just could not miss. It was just kind of the perfect storm of everything. Thunder couldn't shoot. They didn't come out with the intensity to match the Wolves. The Wolves had all the intensity. They couldn't miss. So it was, these things do happen though. We've seen it last year in the finals. The Celtics lost by, I believe, 38 to the Mavs in one of the finals games. And of course, that was the only game they lost. So look, it happens. I think it's happened 3 out of the past 4 years. The eventual NBA champion lost by, I believe, 38 points or more, 37 points or more, something like that. I've seen the stat that no NBA champion has lost by 40 points or more in a playoff run, but that's kind of semantics because there's been 3 out of the last 4 have won by like 36, 38 and more, something like that.
Well, interesting. I was going to bring that stat up to kind of rain on any sunshine you might be wanting to pump, but you already headed that off. But well, I guess one thing that stood out to me is the intensity at which the Wolves played this game, because it was like the script was completely flipped. Like the way that they were forcing turnovers on the Thunder were very uncharacteristic in turning the ball over. I think they had 8 turnovers in the first quarter alone. Like these are not mistakes that the Thunder make. They always win the turnover battle, almost always. They always force more steals and get those fast break opportunities and points off of turnovers. And the Wolves were doing that to the Thunder, especially in that first half when things are really unraveling. So to me, it was maybe a little bit scary that the Thunder had no counterpunch to that.
Yeah, I think you make a great point because it was like a complete 180 of what we saw the first 2 games. And it was completely different than the Thunder typically look because, like you said, especially that turnover battle. It's what the Wolves were doing to the Thunder, we never see happen to the Thunder. And we always see the Thunder do that to other teams. So it was just odd. There's a lot to be said about feeding off the energy of a home crowd and when things, kind of start snowballing. We've seen it plenty of times. The Thunder have won big so many times this postseason, and they've all been at home. Like they've won by 40 plus, they've won by 51, they've won by 30, they've won by 26. All those games were at home. So I think there's a lot to be said about the energy of a home playoff crowd and how things can snowball, especially at home or on the road if you're on the wrong end of the stick. It was just odd to see this happening to the Thunder because this is exactly what they do to teams, and it was happening to them. It was just a very, very peculiar thing to see because we've never seen it happen to this Thunder team.
Yeah, and this badly too. And they trailed by 31 at the half. At that point, it was virtually certain that the Wolves were going to win this one. But you wanted the Thunder to throw some fight, maybe take some momentum into Game 4. And early in that third quarter, it looked like maybe they were. They cut the 31-point lead to 12, I think. But then the Wolves just had a counter to that attack from the Thunder and ended up running away with it. And so the night or the game after Shai had his triumphant game with the MVP award in hand where he played amazing. You also had the All-NBA teams announced with Shai and J-Dub as first and third team, respectively. Lou and J-Dub had named all defensive third team, all these accolades that had happened for the Thunder. And then, look, no counterpunch from the Thunder except for a little run early in that third quarter, and they just got run off the court. So the Wolves, they have to be feeling really good going into game 4.
Yeah, that's the thing with the playoff series. There's so many big momentum swings. And yeah, I mean, the Wolves, when you win by 40 plus points on your home court and your next game is on your home court, you obviously feel like you figured some things out. You feel like, hey, we won this one by 40 plus points. We can win this next game. And then all of a sudden it's a 3-game series. That's definitely the message in the locker room. That's how they're feeling in the locker room. And they should. You should feel confident when you're up by 40, when you win by 40 and you have a chance to tie it on your home court. But flip side of that coin, Thunder still up 2-1. Remember back to the Denver series, the Thunder were down 2-1 in the Denver series, and they were clawing and fighting. That game 4, remember how important that game 4 was in the Denver series because it was a must win. When you're down 2-1, game 4 is a must win. So despite the fact that the Thunder just lost by 40, and despite the fact the Wolves are feeling good and feeling confident, the Wolves are still in the must-win situation. They're still the team that can't go down 3-1 because even if the Wolves win game 4, this is still a 2-2 series that becomes a 3-game series with the 2 of the 3 being in Oklahoma City. So, yeah, Wolves feel good, but I'd still feel much better as a Thunder fan than I would as a Wolves fan.
Well, let me ask about the difference between games 1 and 2 and game 3 and maybe what the Wolves had figured out defensively, because that's what really impressed me the most. Like, yeah, they made some shots, and that obviously is why things got out of hand, but they really put the clamps down defensively on the Thunder. And of course, Thunder's ability to penetrate, because in games 1 and 2, they were getting lots of easy buckets in the lane. Shai was carving up the defense. What did the Wolves do differently? Because I think leading into game 3, they did some of that trapping of Shai as soon as he crossed the half court line. And I thought that the Wolves would do a lot of that and force some of the other players to beat them, but they didn't really trap Shai. They just, did something different in the way that they were defending and packing the paint that caused all these issues. So what did you see in the game plan for the Wolves that was different?
This is going to sound really generic, and it sounds like a Mark Daigneault answer, but I do think it's true. I think the biggest thing is they just played with far more effort, far more energy. They played, like, the rotations were so much tighter. Their closeouts were so much tighter. The way that they were even playing, when they were going straight up, they were just playing their men tighter. Now, they did adjust. The biggest adjustment I saw was how they used Rudy Gobert and, his drop defense and where he was in this defense, in the zone, like just the placement of Rudy Gobert. I think that their use of Rudy Gobert and him coming up higher, him contesting, like, the mid-range and the shots, I think that just their adjustments of Rudy Gobert and how he was used made a big difference. And, he's a multi-defensive player of the year winner for a reason. And there was all this talk about the fact that, hey, Rudy Gobert, after the first 2 games, is not usable. He can't play him. You got to cut his minutes. If the Wolves want to win games against the Thunder are just going to abuse him if Rudy is out there. And then they come out, and he made a huge impact in game 3. So I think it starts, though, with, as generic as it sounds, them just playing harder and tighter and better on defense. And they're far more physical defensively in games 1 and 2 than they were in games 1 and 2. And it's so funny because kind of like the narrative was after the first 2 games, like, oh, the Thunder defense just gets away with so much, handsy defense and being so physical, and they don't call it on the other end and all that stuff. I actually thought in game 3 that the Wolves got away with a lot of, like, physicality and the way they were playing defense. And so, it's just kind of funny to see that shift. But I didn't really see anybody talking about it when the Wolves were doing it without calls. But that's not the reason why this got out of hand or anything like that. I just think it was kind of like, subplot, and narratives and things like that. I think that, that's playoff defense. And I like that kind of defense. And I like the way the Thunder play that defense, but it was the Wolves playing that brand of defense in game 3, I thought.
Well, and I think back to my point where it looked like the Wolves started playing more like the Thunder. That's really what I saw more on the defensive side of the ball. And I think you're right. I think I noticed Gobert coming a little bit further out. It was kind of that free throw line extended where he was going to come and meet the ball handler at that point. And since the ball handler still had his defender attached to him, it was like there was a trap right there. They were collapsing right there on the ball handler, kind of at that free throw line area, forcing them to kind of kick out to shooters, but they were kicking out to the top of the key. They weren't getting down far enough into like find shooters in the corner, and led to the Thunder shooting so poorly. Like they took 23 threes in the first half. They made just 6. And of course, when all those things are snowballing, when you can't put the ball in the basket, you're just getting one and done. You're turning the ball over. All those things went wrong. But to me, they were defending a lot differently. Gobert wasn't dropping as far in the paint. And to me, it just looked like Shai and J-Dub, they really didn't know how to attack.
Yeah, which I think that's going to be the biggest, when the Thunder are going over game film, I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that they look at. Like, how do they adjust to the Wolves' defensive adjustment and how they attack? Because they learned a lot. And look, they were used to playing this Denver zone defense for 7 games, and they figured it out by the end of that Nuggets series. And then they come into the Wolves series, and the Wolves just are not playing as much zone. And when they do, the Thunder are picking apart because they kind of got used to it. I just think that despite the fact that the Wolves had the better personnel defensively than the Nuggets did, the Nuggets played a better brand of defense as far as the Wolves in the first 2 games. So, you settle into this kind of comfort zone probably offensively where, started working towards the end of the Nuggets series, and your offense is working so well as far as just picking apart this Wolves defense in games 1 and 2. Wolves made adjustments. Now we see what adjustments the Thunder make for game 4. This game 4 is huge. This game 4 is huge. Obviously, even though it's not a must win for the Thunder, because you can still make this a 3-game series and 2 of the games are at home, you can still pretty much end the series if you go up 3-1. And if you go 2-2, things become a lot more dicey. We've seen teams come back from down 0-2 semi-regularly, like every playoff, even though we know the stat is 92%, if you go up 2-0 that you go on to win the series, 2-2 becomes much more dicey.
Yeah, that's why I think Game 4 is so critical for both teams, because the Thunder, again, have that opportunity to take control, take a 3-1 lead in the Western Conference Finals. Going to forget that that's happened before in 2016. And the Wolves have the opportunity to make it 2-2, make it a 3-game series. And I guess my opinion is if the Wolves win Game 4, we are looking at that 7-game series most likely. Of course, if the Thunder win Game 4, then we could end up wrapping this one up in 5 or 6. So Thunder fans are feeling a little bit vulnerable right now. They were feeling so good after games 1 and 2. And I don't think anybody could have seen the Thunder just get demolished the way that they did in Game 3. Tee up your prediction for Game 4.
I think that Game 4 will be the first close game of this series. Thunder dominated games 1 and 2. Wolves completely dominated Game 3. We have yet to see a close game in the series. This is the game, I think, because the Wolves, coming off that win, have the confidence. They have home court advantage. But now we will finally see in this series a desperate Thunder team. When you get beat big, you come back with a punch. The Thunder are, they have a lot of pride as a team. And this team always responds very well to losses. They've only lost 2 games in a row twice all season long. They have not lost 2 games in a row in the playoffs. They have never lost 3 games in a row. Now, that's not to say those things couldn't happen, but I do expect the Thunder to come back much more focused, much more intense than they were in Game 3 and look to correct, the things that happened in Game 3. So I expect this one to be a close one. I expect this one to be a good one. I expect this one to be, if you're a Thunder fan, it's going to be nerve-wracking down the stretch of the fourth quarter. If you're a Wolves fan, it's going to be nerve-wracking going down the stretch of the fourth quarter. That's the kind of game I expect in Game 4.
All right. Well, did you tee up who you think is going to win?
I think the Thunder win. I said I thought that they would split Minnesota and that the Wolves would get Game 3. Now, obviously, I did not expect the Wolves to completely blow out the Thunder in Game 3. So I guess I have an out to be able to change my prediction. But this Thunder team is so resilient. I still think that they're overall the better team. I expect a much better performance in Game 4. So I think the Thunder win Game 4. That's my official prediction. I got to stick with saying they split in Minnesota.
Well, I'm going to go back to I'm going to go to something that you tweeted, and I'm going to press on that a little bit. So after the game, you said that it's one of those nights, and the Thunder got to flush it and try to get Game 4 on Monday night. Um, you did mention they got to look at the tape. I guess I'm kind of feeling like the team should do the opposite of flush it. They should watch that game, every moment of that game, and feel all the things that they did wrong, right? Really dial in and say, I am never going to let that happen again. We have way too much pride. We have way too much on the line, and we are too good to let that happen again and just put it behind us and forget that ever happened.
Yeah, I totally understand that point of view. My feeling on the flush it, what I mean by flush it is this team has said over and over again, never get too high after a win, never get too low after a loss, 0-0 mentality, 1 of 82. Like that is this team's mindset, and it has worked so well for them. And I think it's a big part of the resiliency. They know the kind of team that they are, and they know what they're capable of, and they will be motivated by Game 3. I think whether or not they go back and watch film, which they'll go back and watch film, but whether or not they I guess I would say feel it and dwell on it and all those things, they're going to be motivated. They're feeling that loss. They're going to come back and want to punch back. So my flush it is more so from the fact of you can't dwell on it. Just like if they were to win by 40 points, you can't be feeling yourself and dwell on that and be feeling good about, Game 4. And I just don't think that you can be down or let that Game 3 affect your confidence. This confidence that you've instilled in your team throughout these 82 games and these playoffs. You got to flush that feeling and go in with the mindset, that 0-0 mindset. I think that's worked so well for them. I think the 0-0 mindset works and wins, but I think it also does work in losses. So you just can't let that affect your confidence going into Game 4.
Well, for our final segment, I do want to end on a high note because we've been really tapping into the lows talking about Game 3. But since we last recorded, Shai was awarded the NBA MVP. It was expected, but 100% well earned. What do you think that Shai winning means for him and his career? What it means for the team to have its third MVP winner in its short history in the NBA? What it means for his team? He bought everybody Rolexes. Kind of go through the emotions of SGA winning MVP.
Yeah, I think it's huge. It's huge for Shai's legacy. Shai has now finished number 5 in MVP voting, number 2 in MVP voting, and number 1 3 straight years. He's 3 times first team All-NBA, 3-time All-Star. Like, he is stacking these accolades now and these achievements now. And winning an MVP in the NBA is a thing that very, very few players ever accomplish. It is the best of the best. And now Shai's name is forever etched into NBA history. It almost secures him a lock in the Hall of Fame. Every MVP winner is a Hall of Famer. The only question mark now is Derrick Rose, and of course we know why. With the injuries and everything that ensued after he won MVP. But every MVP winner is a Hall of Famer. So, for his legacy, this is absolutely huge, and for the Thunder legacy to have 3 individual players in Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and Shai win MVP in the matter of 12 years. No NBA team has ever done it. The Thunder have built this culture of winning, and it's kind of becoming their brand. Yes, it's a small market. Yes, they work differently than other teams work and all those things and everything. But I think overall, this team is building a brand of winning. And this goes into it, winning MVP, stacking accomplishments, going to the Western Conference Finals for the 5th time in the past, 15 years, to have 3 MVP winners and hopefully to make your second finals trip. And then for this team, this is a young team that looks to Shai as a leader. It's just another thing that's going to instill confidence in this team. And it's another thing that just makes this team feel like an emerging juggernaut in the NBA. And, going forward, Shai will always be an MVP player. And that's something that this team will always feel confident. When they go out into the court every single time, this team will have the confidence of, hey, we had the best player tonight because we have Shai and he's an MVP winner. So I think it's big for Shai, for the organization and for this individual team.
100% agree. And I think what I would add to, I think all the really good comments that you made there is, especially the last two MVP winners for the Thunder. I mean, they just kind of epitomize what the organization wants to stand for. You know, Russ just with his, I'm going to do everything that I can to help my team. You know, I won't hold anything back. He just gives 100% every single night. And then now with Shai, who was a lottery pick, but I don't think coming out of college, anybody thought that this guy had future MVP written on him. He didn't have the expectations of like a Cooper Flag coming into the league next year. He was included in that trade for Paul George, where the Presti was smart enough to see, I really want that guy. But the Clippers not only attached him, but a bevy of first round picks and swaps to get Paul George. But Shai's the kind of guy who has just worked every point in his life to get to where he is. And I don't know, that just says a lot about him, about the kind of culture the Thunder have, that you've got a guy who I think 100% earned it, right? He's got a ton of natural talent, obviously, but he has worked so hard to get where he is. And a guy who also gives that much credit to his teammates. This is the kind of MVP I think that the league wants and needs. And he's like the perfect MVP to represent the Thunder.
100% agreed. He really is. Like, he is class from like everything you want. As the face of the franchise, he represents that. And we've seen it from the beginning, like character-wise, work ethic-wise, who he is off the court, the leader that he's become. But then the talent has just, it was there, but he has gotten better and better and better every single season. And, Chris Paul said that he's a better person than he is a hooper. And every interaction I've ever had with him or seen him have with other people on and off the court, just top class. You couldn't ask for a better face of the franchise. He may be the best player in the NBA right now too. I know Jokic just like flat gets that title, but Shai won MVP for a reason, and they did beat Jokic and the Nuggets. And if at worst you've got one of the 2 or 3 best players in the NBA, and he also happens to be an incredible person and represents your city and your franchise in the best of ways, Thunder fans and the Thunder organization have it really, really good with SGA.
Well, that is a great way to close, talking about the world-class talent and the world-class player and the world-class person that is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the 2025 NBA MVP. Well, everybody stay tuned for Game 4, pivotal Game 4 that can potentially decide control over the series and a trip to the NBA Finals. But that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, host of the podcast. He's Brandon Rahbar, Daily Thunder beat writer. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to the Daily Thunder podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor and leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back in your feed soon.